They said, "You'll only be welcome at our Christmas party if you write a $35,000 check." I simply replied, "Enjoy," and secretly changed the succession of my inheritance when they found out who the new heir was. 80 missed calls. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The phone rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the time because I was sitting in my leather chair, the one Martha had given me for our 30th anniversary, watching the grandfather clock tick away another quiet afternoon. At 60, these quiet moments had become precious to me. Too precious, as it turned out. "Dad?" Rebecca's voice came through the speaker, but there was something different about her tone. Cold, calculated. The warmth that used to be there when she was little, when she'd run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, was completely gone. "Rebecca, sweetheart, how are you?" I settled back into the chair, genuinely happy to hear from my daughter. It had been 3 weeks since our last conversation, and even that had been brief. She was always so busy these days with her new life, her new husband, her new social circle. "I'm fine, Dad. Listen, I need to talk to you about Christmas." My heart lifted slightly. Maybe she was calling to invite me over early, or to ask about bringing the grandkids by to see me. "Of course, honey. What about Christmas?" There was a pause, and I could hear muffled voices in the background. Then she cleared her throat, and when she spoke again, her voice had that rehearsed quality that made my stomach tighten. "Brad and I are hosting our annual Christmas party this year. It's going to be quite the event. All of his business associates, some very important people from his firm. The kind of gathering that could really impact his career, if you know what I mean." I frowned, not understanding where this was going. "That sounds wonderful, Rebecca. I'm sure it'll be lovely." "The thing is, Dad." Another pause. "Well, we've been talking, and we think it would be best if you made a contribution to the event. You know, to show that you're invested in the family's success." The words hit me like ice water. "A contribution? $35,000. She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was asking me to pass the salt. It's really not that much when you think about what Brad stands to gain from this party. These connections could set us up for life. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I was hearing. My own daughter was asking me to pay to attend her Christmas party. Not asking, demanding. "Rebecca, I don't understand. You want me to pay $35,000 to come to Christmas dinner?" "It's not dinner, Dad. It's a sophisticated networking event, and yes, we think it would be appropriate for you to contribute to the costs. After all, you'll be benefiting from the connections too, in a way." My throat felt dry. "Benefiting how?" "Well, you'll be there, part of the family. Brad's associates will see that we come from substantial means. It reflects well on all of us." The silence stretched between us, and I could feel something breaking inside my chest. Not my heart, that had been slowly cracking for years. This was something deeper. My faith in family, maybe. My belief that blood meant something more than dollar signs. "And if I don't pay this contribution?" Rebecca's voice went even colder. "If that was possible. Then maybe it would be better if you made other plans for Christmas this year. We wouldn't want you to feel out of place or uncomfortable." Out of place, uncomfortable. At my own daughter's Christmas celebration, I thought about all the Christmases I'd hosted when Rebecca and David were young. The tree that touched the ceiling, the stockings hung with care, the mountain of presents I'd worked overtime to afford. I thought about Martha, gone now for 5 years, and how she would have reacted to this conversation. She would have been heartbroken. "Dad, are you still there?" "I'm here," I managed. "So what do you think? Can we count on your contribution? I really need to know soon. We're finalizing the catering arrangements." Catering arrangements. She was talking about me like I was a line item in her budget. Pay up or stay away. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about Christmas too," I said quietly. "Remembering when you were 7 and you made me that ornament out of construction paper and glitter. Do you remember that?" "Dad, that's not really relevant to what we're discussing. You wrote 'World's Best Daddy' on it in purple crayon. I still have it, you know. It's on my tree every year." "That's nice, Dad. But about the party?" I closed my eyes, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. The daughter I'd raised, the little girl who used to crawl into my lap and tell me about her day, was gone. Had been gone for years, probably. I'd just been too desperate to hold on to the memory to notice. "You know what, Rebecca?" I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Approvatum." "What? Enjoy yourselves. Have a wonderful party." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke, and there was uncertainty in her voice for the first time during our conversation. "Dad, what does that mean? Are you going to contribute or not?" "It means exactly what I said. Enjoy yourselves." "But Dad, you can't just—" I hung up. I sat there in my chair, the one Martha had given me, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Relief. Pure, unexpected relief. The phone immediately started ringing again, but I didn't answer it. I just sat there listening to the grandfather clock tick away the moments, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could breathe. The phone stopped ringing eventually, then it started again, then stopped, started, stopped. I unplugged it from the wall and poured myself a glass of the good scotch, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion. It seemed to me that this qualified. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of anger or hurt, though both were there, burning quietly in my chest. No, I couldn't sleep because my mind kept taking me back through the years, showing me all the signs I'd missed. Or maybe I hadn't missed them. Maybe I'd just chosen not to see them. I got up around 2 in the morning and made myself a cup of coffee, then walked through my house in the dark. Every room held memories, and suddenly they all felt tainted. The family photos on the mantel, the Christmas ornaments carefully stored in the basement, the college graduation pictures, they all looked different now, like evidence of my own stupidity. I remembered Rebecca's college graduation, Northwestern University, expensive as hell. I'd taken out a second mortgage to pay for it, working nights at the plant to cover the extra shifts. When she walked across that stage, I thought it was worth every penny, every sleepless night, every ache in my back from the double shifts. After the ceremony, she'd hugged me briefly and said, "Thanks, Dad. This is going to open so many doors." She wasn't wrong. It had opened doors, right to a world where I was no longer welcome unless I paid for the privilege. David's wedding had cost me nearly $50,000, not because he asked, because I offered. I wanted my son to have the wedding of his dreams, the kind of celebration I could never afford for Martha and myself when we were young. I remember sitting at the reception, watching David dance with his new wife, thinking about how proud I was that I could give him this gift. The thank you note I received 2 weeks later was printed. Pre-made cards with our names filled in. Not even his handwriting. I walked into my study and opened the filing cabinet where I kept all my financial records. 27 years of canceled checks, bank statements, receipts, the evidence of my devotion laid out in black and white. Rebecca's car when she turned 16, $15,000. David's apartment deposit when he moved to Chicago, $5,000. Rebecca's law school loans when she decided she wanted to be a paralegal, $28,000. David's startup money for the business that failed within 6 months, $40,000. House down payments, car repairs, medical bills when David broke his leg skiing in Colorado, Christmas presents, birthday gifts, loans that were never repaid because I never expected them to be repaid. They were my children. I wanted to help them succeed, but when had helping become enabling? When had love become obligation? I pulled out the folder marked recent and flipped through the statements from the past 2 years. Rebecca's credit card bill when she maxed out 3 cards buying furniture for her new house, $12,000. David's request for help with his mortgage when he overextended himself buying the McMansion in the suburbs, $8,000. Rebecca's emergency loan when Brad's bonus was delayed, $6,000. None of them had been paid back. None of them were even acknowledged anymore. The worst part was looking at my own balance. For a man who'd worked 42 years, who'd been careful with money, who'd never taken an extravagant vacation or bought anything unnecessary, I should have had more saved. A lot more. But every time I'd managed to build up a nest egg, one of the kids would have a crisis, an opportunity, a need. I thought about Martha, gone now for 5 years, and wondered what she would have said about tonight's phone call. She'd always been softer with the kids than I was, more willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, but even she had started to notice things toward the end. "Gerald," she'd said to me about 6 months before the cancer took her, "do you think the children call us enough?" We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and I remembered being surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean really call us. To see how we're doing, to talk about our lives, not just when they need something." I'd brushed off her concern then, told her the kids were just busy building their lives. But she was right, as usual. When was the last time either of them had called just to chat? When was the last time they'd asked about my health, my hobbies, my thoughts on anything that didn't involve my wallet? The house felt emptier now, standing there in my study at 3 in the morning, surrounded by the paper trail of my own foolishness. I'd spent decades thinking I was being a good father, a generous father, but generosity requires gratitude to complete the circle, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt genuinely appreciated by either of my children. I thought about Rebecca's tone today. That cold calculation. She hadn't been asking a favor. She'd been collecting a debt she felt I owed her simply for existing in her life. The audacity of it was staggering. $35,000 to attend a Christmas party. My own daughter's Christmas party. But what really broke my heart wasn't the money. It was the casual dismissal. The assumption that I would either pay up or disappear quietly. Like I was some embarrassing relative they had to manage rather than the father who'd sacrificed everything to give them the best life possible. I closed the filing cabinet and walked back to the kitchen. Through the window, I could see the first hints of dawn creeping across the sky. In a few hours, my phone would probably start ringing again. Rebecca would want to know what my answer was. David would probably call too, once Rebecca filled him in on the situation. But I already knew what my answer was going to be. The same thing I'd told Rebecca yesterday. Enjoy yourselves. I just wasn't sure they understood yet that I meant it. That this wasn't a negotiation or a tantrum. This was me finally accepting what they'd been trying to tell me for years. I wasn't really family anymore. I was just a bank they occasionally visited. Well, this bank was closing its doors. Permanently. I made myself another cup of coffee and sat down to watch the sunrise. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to worry about anyone else's financial emergencies. The thought should have been liberating. Instead, it just made me feel incredibly, unutterably sad. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It was the kind of sharp, cold clarity that comes after a fever breaks, painful but necessary. I made my coffee, read the newspaper, and waited for the law office to open. At exactly 9 o'clock, I called Harrison and Associates, the firm that had handled Martha's estate and our wills for the past 15 years. "Mr. Thompson, what a pleasure to hear from you," came James Harrison's familiar voice. "How can I help you today?" "I need to make some changes to my will," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Significant changes." There was a pause. "Of course. Would you like to schedule an appointment? I have an opening Thursday afternoon. I'd prefer to come in today if possible. This is rather urgent." "Let me check my calendar. I can fit you in at 2 o'clock. Will that work?" "Perfect." I spent the morning walking through my house, really looking at it for the first time in months. Martha and I had bought this place 35 years ago, when the kids were small and the neighborhood was still affordable. We'd painted every room ourselves, planted the oak tree in the backyard, built the deck where we'd hosted countless barbecues and birthday parties. The house was worth close to $800,000 now, thanks to the neighborhood's transformation and the improvements I'd made over the years. Combined with my retirement accounts, life insurance, and the modest investment portfolio I'd built despite all the loans to the kids, my estate was worth just over $2 million. $2 million that Rebecca and David had always assumed would be theirs someday. Not because we'd ever discussed it, but because that's what children do. They assume their parents' lives exist to benefit them. At 2 o'clock sharp, I was sitting across from James Harrison in his oak-paneled office, watching him review my current will. The document was straightforward. Everything split equally between Rebecca and David, with small bequests to a few charities Martha and I had supported. "What kind of changes are we talking about, Gerald?" James asked, removing his reading glasses. "I want to change the primary beneficiaries." His eyebrows rose slightly. "All right. Do you want to adjust the percentages between Rebecca and David?" "No. I want to remove them entirely." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. James had known my family for years. He'd drawn up trust funds for the grandchildren, handled the legal work when I'd helped David with his business ventures. This wasn't what he was expecting to hear. "Gerald, that's certainly your right, but it's a significant decision. May I ask what's prompted this change?" I told him about the phone call, about the $35,000 contribution required for me to attend my own daughter's Christmas party. I told him about the years of financial requests, the lack of gratitude, the way I'd slowly transformed from father to ATM in their eyes. James listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. Have you considered that this might be a reaction to recent emotions? Perhaps it would be wise to wait a few weeks, let things settle before making such a drastic change. James, I'm 60 years old. I've been thinking about this for longer than I care to admit. The phone call was just the final piece of evidence. Who did you have in mind as the new beneficiary? That was the question I'd been wrestling with all morning. Who in my life had shown me genuine kindness without expecting anything in return? Who had treated me like a human being rather than a resource to be exploited? The answer had come to me while I was sitting on my deck watching Marcus work in my neighbor's yard. Marcus Rodriguez, I said. James frowned, clearly trying to place the name. I'm not familiar with that name. Is he a relative? He's my landscaper. Has been for about 3 years now. Your landscaper. His name is Marcus Rodriguez. He's 30 years old, married, has 2 young children. He started working for me after I threw out my back trying to do the yard work myself. I could see James struggling to understand. In his world, people left their money to family, or to institutions, or to causes. They didn't leave fortunes to their yard maintenance man. Gerald, I need to ask, have you discussed this with Marcus? Does he have any expectation of this inheritance? God, no. He has no idea. That's exactly the point, James. Marcus treats me well because he's a decent person, not because he's expecting something from me. When he comes to do the yard work, he always asks how I'm feeling, if there's anything else I need. His wife sends me homemade tamales at Christmas. His kids drew me pictures when I was sick with pneumonia last winter. I paused, thinking about those pictures still hanging on my refrigerator. Crayon drawings of houses and trees and stick figures labeled Mr. Gerald. When was the last time my own grandchildren had made me anything? Marcus works 2 jobs to support his family, I continued. Landscaping during the day, night security at a warehouse. He's trying to save money to buy a small house, get out of the apartment they're renting. He's never asked me for anything except fair payment for honest work. James was taking notes now, but I could see the concern in his expression. Gerald, this is a very generous gesture, but it's also a life-changing amount of money for someone who isn't expecting it. Have you considered the impact this might have on Marcus and his family? I've considered it carefully. The money will be held in a trust, with distributions over time. Enough to buy a house immediately, pay for the children's education, and provide security for the future, but structured so it doesn't overwhelm them or change who they are. And you're certain about disinheriting Rebecca and David completely? Completely certain. James was quiet for a long moment, tapping his pen against his legal pad. All right, I'll need some information about Marcus. Full name, address, social security number if you have it. And I strongly recommend that you think about including a letter explaining your decision. Not for legal purposes, but for personal ones. A letter? Something that explains your reasoning. Both for Marcus, so he understands why he's receiving this inheritance, and for Rebecca and David, so they understand what led to this decision. It might provide some closure. I nodded. That made sense. How long will it take to prepare the new documents? I can have everything ready by Friday. But Gerald, I want you to promise me something. Take until Friday to think about this. Really think about it. This isn't a decision you can undo once it's done. I understand. Do you? Because once Rebecca and David find out about this change, there's no going back. Relationships will be irreparably damaged. I almost laughed at that. James, the relationship was damaged the moment my daughter told me I needed to pay $35,000 to attend her Christmas party. I'm not damaging anything. I'm just acknowledging what's already broken. That evening, I sat down to write the letter James had suggested. It was harder than I'd expected. How do you summarize a lifetime of disappointment in a few pages? How do you explain to your children that their love had price tags attached, and you'd finally decided to stop paying? I wrote about the phone call, but I also wrote about the years leading up to it. The constant requests for money, the lack of genuine interest in my life, the way they'd slowly transformed our relationship into a transaction. I wrote about how proud I'd been of them, how much I'd wanted to help them succeed, and how betrayed I felt when I realized they saw my help not as love, but as obligation. For Marcus, I wrote a different letter. I told him about his kindness, his work ethic, the way his family had welcomed me into their circle without expecting anything in return. I told him that the inheritance came with no strings attached, no expectations. It was simply gratitude for treating an old man with dignity. By the time I finished writing, it was nearly midnight. I sealed both letters in envelopes and placed them in my desk drawer. On Friday, I would sign the new will and hand over the letters to James for safekeeping. For the first time since Rebecca's phone call, I felt something other than sadness or anger. I felt purposeful, determined, maybe even a little proud. I was taking control of my life again, and it felt good. Friday came and went without fanfare. I signed the new will in James Harrison's office, witnessed by two of his associates who had no idea they were participating in what would eventually become the most dramatic moment in my family's history. The documents were filed away in the firm's vault, and I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years. The days that followed were remarkably quiet. My phone, which had been ringing constantly since Rebecca's ultimatum, fell silent. No calls asking for my decision about the Christmas party. No follow-up demands or guilt trips. Nothing. At first, I thought they might be giving me time to come to my senses and write the check. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized something else was happening. They were moving on without me, planning their sophisticated networking event, their Christmas celebration, their future, all without any consideration for whether I would be part of it. The silence should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I found myself settling into a routine that felt almost foreign after decades of constant interruption from my children's crises and demands. I started each morning with coffee on the deck, watching Marcus work in the yards around the neighborhood. He moved with quiet efficiency, taking pride in his work even when no one was watching. Sometimes his wife, Elena, would bring him lunch, and I'd see them sitting together on someone's porch steps, sharing sandwiches and conversation in rapid Spanish. One Thursday morning, Marcus knocked on my door around 10 o'clock. I opened it to find him standing there with his hat in his hands, looking concerned.
"Mr. Gerald, I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to check if everything is okay. I haven't seen you outside much lately, and Mrs. Patterson next door said she was worried." The simple concern in his voice nearly undid me. When was the last time one of my own children had checked on my well-being without an ulterior motive? "I'm fine, Marcus."
"Just been keeping to myself more lately. Family stuff, you know." He nodded, understanding crossing his features. "Family can be complicated sometimes, but if you need anything at all, you just let me know, okay? Elena, she worries about you too. She says you look sad lately. Tell Elena I appreciate her concern, and Marcus, thank you for checking on me." After he left, I found myself thinking about the difference between his concern and my children's absence. Marcus had no obligation to care about my well-being, yet he'd taken time out of his busy day to knock on my door. My own children, who supposedly loved me, hadn't bothered to call in 3 weeks. The realization stung, but it also strengthened my resolve. I was making the right decision. As November turned into December, I began to understand what my life could be without the constant undercurrent of being used. I read books I'd been meaning to get to for years. I took long walks through the neighborhood, actually noticing the way the light fell through the trees, the sound of children playing in their yards, the smell of wood smoke from chimneys. I started cooking again, really cooking, not just heating up frozen dinners. Martha had taught me some of her recipes over the years, and I found myself making her beef stew, her cornbread, her apple pie. The house filled with aromas that brought back memories of when we were young and happy and thought our children would always want to come home. On a Tuesday evening in mid-December, I was just finishing dinner when Marcus appeared at my kitchen window, waving. I opened the back door to find him standing there with a covered plate. "Elena made extra mole tonight," he said, offering me the plate. "She thought you might like some. It's her grandmother's recipe." The plate was warm in my hands, and the smell coming from under the foil made my mouth water. "That's very kind of her, Marcus. Please tell her thank you. She says you're welcome to join us for dinner sometime, if you want company." Company. Such a simple concept, but it had been so long since I'd been invited somewhere just for the pleasure of my company, not because someone needed something from me. "I'd like that very much," I heard myself saying. "Good. Elena will be happy. She's been wanting to practice her English with someone besides me and the kids." That Saturday, I found myself sitting at Marcus and Elena's small dining table, sharing a meal with their family. Their apartment was tiny but immaculate, filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation in both Spanish and English. Their children, Sophia and Miguel, were 8 and 6, full of energy and questions. "Mr. Gerald, Sophia asked me seriously over dessert. Do you have grandchildren? The question hit me unexpectedly hard. I do, I managed, but I don't see them very often. That's sad, Miguel piped up. Our abuelo lives far away in Mexico, but he calls us every Sunday. Maybe your grandchildren are just busy. Elena shot her son a gentle look and changed the subject, but the innocence of his comment stayed with me. Maybe your grandchildren are just busy. If only it were that simple. As I walked home that evening, I realized something profound had happened. For 3 hours I'd sat at a table where I was wanted, not needed, where my presence was a gift, not a transaction, where the conversation flowed around topics like Elena's job at the hospital, Marcus's plans to expand his landscaping business, the children's school projects. No one had asked me for money. No one had made me feel like an obligation or an embarrassment. I'd simply been a guest, a friend, a human being worthy of kindness. When I got home, I found a message on my answering machine. David's voice, casual and brief. Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you're doing well. Call me back when you get a chance. I stared at the machine for a long moment, then deleted the message without returning the call. There would be time for conversations with David later, after he learned about the will. Right now, I was protecting the peace I'd found in these weeks of silence. Christmas was 3 weeks away. Rebecca's party, the one I'd need to pay $35,000 to attend, was probably being planned in detail. Caterers hired, guest lists finalized, decorations ordered. All of it happening without any input from me, which told me everything I needed to know about how essential my presence really was. I went to bed that night feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not happiness exactly, because the sadness of losing my children was still there, a dull ache that might never fully go away. But contentment, peace. For the first time in decades, no one expected anything from me except to be myself. And after years of being valued only for what I could provide, simply being myself felt like the greatest luxury in the world. Tomorrow I would continue building this new life, one quiet day at a time. The old Gerald, the one who jumped every time his children called with a new crisis or demand, was gone. In his place was someone I was just beginning to meet, a man who understood the difference between being loved and being useful. The difference, I was learning, was everything. The avalanche started with something as innocent as a casual conversation at the country club. I wouldn't learn the details until much later, but apparently James Harrison had run into Rebecca's husband Brad at their monthly golf outing. They'd been making small talk on the 19th hole when Brad, perhaps emboldened by a few drinks, decided to share what he considered an amusing story about his father-in-law's stubbornness. You wouldn't believe the drama Rebecca's old man is putting us through, Brad had said, shaking his head with what he probably thought was good-natured exasperation. We asked him to contribute to our Christmas party. Nothing unreasonable, just $35,000 to help cover costs. And he's acting like we asked him to donate a kidney. James, ever the professional, had simply nodded and made non-committal sounds. But later that evening, he'd apparently mentioned to his wife that one of his clients was dealing with some family tensions around money and estate planning. His wife, who knew Rebecca socially through various charity committees, had put 2 and 2 together. By Tuesday morning, the story had evolved and spread through the intricate network of suburban gossip until it reached someone who knew Rebecca directly. And that's when my daughter learned that her father had recently visited his attorney to make significant changes to his will. The first call came at 6:47 a.m. on Wednesday. I was making coffee when the phone rang with an urgency that made my hand shake slightly as I reached for it. Dad? Rebecca's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic underneath. We need to talk. Good morning, Rebecca. How are you? Cut the pleasantries, Dad. I just heard something very disturbing, and I need you to tell me it's not true. I poured my coffee slowly, taking my time. What did you hear? That you've been to see James Harrison. That you've changed your will. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I visit James for various reasons, Rebecca. Legal advice, updating documents. It's not unusual for a man my age to review his estate planning. Don't play games with me. The controlled facade shattered completely. Did you change your will or not? I sat down at my kitchen table, looking out at my yard where Marcus would be arriving soon to do the winter cleanup. Yes, I did. The silence that followed was so complete, I wondered if the line had gone dead. Then I heard her breathing, rapid and shallow, like someone trying not to hyperventilate. Because of the party? Because of the $35,000? Dad, we were just trying to make sure you felt included in our new social circle. We thought you'd appreciate being part of something important. The lie came so smoothly, so naturally, that I almost admired her ability to rewrite history in real time. We both knew exactly what that phone call had been about, but she was already constructing a new narrative where she was the misunderstood daughter trying to include her difficult father. Rebecca, we both know that's not what happened. Then what? What did we do that was so terrible you'd cut us out of your will? I didn't cut you out because of what you did. I cut you out because of who you've become. Another silence, then her voice came back harder, more calculating. Who have I become, Dad? Successful? Independent? I'm sorry if my achievements make you feel inadequate. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Even now, even knowing she was about to lose millions of dollars, she couldn't resist one more dig at my pride. You've become someone who thinks love has a price tag, I said quietly. Someone who sees their father as a source of funding rather than a human being deserving of respect. That's not fair, and you know it. We've always been grateful for your help. No, Rebecca, you've always been expectant of my help. There's a difference. The phone rang again, before I'd even finished my coffee. This time it was David, and he dispensed with any pretense of pleasantries. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded the moment I answered. Good morning, David. Rebecca just called me. She's hysterical. She says you've lost your mind and disinherited us over some party. Is that how she explained it? She said you're having some kind of breakdown because she asked you to contribute to a Christmas event. Dad, this is insane. You can't just cut your children out of your will because of a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, David. It was very clear. $35,000 to attend my own daughter's Christmas party, or don't come at all. So what? You've spent more than that on both of us plenty of times. What's the big deal? The casual dismissal in his voice told me everything I needed to know about how my years of financial support had been perceived, not as sacrifice or love, but as baseline expectation. Of course I would pay. Of course I would give them whatever they needed. That's what fathers did, wasn't it? The big deal, David, is that it was never about the money. It was about being told I had to pay to be considered family. Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. Rebecca was probably just stressed about the party costs. You know how these things can get expensive. Do I? I've never been invited to one before. That seemed to give him pause. When he spoke again, his voice was different, more cautious. Dad, look, maybe we could have handled things better, but cutting us out of your will, that's nuclear, that's permanent. Yes, it is. Who? Where is the money going? That's not your concern anymore. Like hell, it's not my concern. That's my inheritance, my future, my kids' college funds. And there it was, the raw truth underneath all the family rhetoric. Not grief at losing their father's love, but panic at losing their father's money. The calls continued throughout the day. Rebecca called back 4 more times, each conversation following the same pattern: denial, bargaining, anger, then hanging up when I refused to be moved. David called twice more, once trying the guilt approach. Mom would be so disappointed in you. And once trying threats, you're going to regret this when you're old and need us. By evening, they'd apparently coordinated their efforts. David showed up at my door at 6 o'clock, with Rebecca arriving 20 minutes later. I watched through my front window as they conferred in my driveway, Rebecca gesticulating wildly while David tried to calm her down. When I opened the door, Rebecca's eyes were red and swollen, her perfect makeup smeared. David looked tired and defeated. For a moment, seeing them standing there together on my porch, I felt a flicker of the old paternal instinct to comfort them, to fix whatever was wrong. Then Rebecca opened her mouth. Daddy, please. We can work this out. Whatever we did wrong, we can fix it. Just tell us what you want. Tell us what you want, as if love and respect were items on a menu I could order. I want you to leave, I said quietly. Dad, be reasonable, David started, but I held up my hand. I want you to leave my property. I want you to stop calling me. I want you to accept that your actions have consequences, and this is one of them. You can't do this to us. Rebecca's composure finally shattered completely. We're your children. We're your family. No, I said, stepping back and putting my hand on the door. You were my children, but family doesn't put a price on love. Family doesn't treat each other like ATMs. You made your choice when you decided I was only valuable for what I could give you. Who's getting the money? David demanded, his face flushed with anger. Some charity, some cause, at least tell us it's going somewhere worthwhile. I almost smiled. Even now, they couldn't imagine that I might choose to give my money to someone who actually cared about me as a person. It's going to someone who deserves it, I said, and closed the door. They stood on my porch for another 10 minutes, arguing with each other in voices loud enough for me to hear through the door. Rebecca wanted to keep trying to reason with me. David wanted to call James Harrison and demand details. Neither of them, I noticed, suggested that maybe they should reflect on their own behavior. Finally, they left. I watched from my living room window as they drove away, Rebecca's luxury SUV followed by David's BMW. Both vehicles I'd helped them buy, I realized with a bitter laugh. My phone rang 80 times that night. I know because I counted. 80 calls from various combinations of Rebecca's and David's numbers, their spouses' numbers, even numbers I didn't recognize, probably friends they'd enlisted to help change my mind. I unplugged the phone after call number 80 and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby. 3 months passed before I saw Rebecca and David again. 3 months of blissful silence, broken only by the occasional legal letter from attorneys they'd hired to contest the will. James Harrison assured me that they had no grounds for a successful challenge. I was of sound mind, had made the decision voluntarily, and had documented my reasoning thoroughly. The confrontation came on a Saturday morning in March. I was in my garden working alongside Marcus to prepare the flower beds for spring planting when I looked up to see both my children walking across my yard. They looked older somehow, worn down. Rebecca's designer clothes couldn't hide the stress lines around her eyes, and David had the hollow look of a man who'd been sleeping poorly for months. Marcus noticed them too and started to gather his tools. "I can come back later, Mr. Gerald." "No need," I said, wiping dirt from my hands. "They won't be staying long." Rebecca reached us first, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. She looked at Marcus with barely concealed disdain, then back at me. "Dad, we need to talk. Privately. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Marcus." David frowned. "This is family business, Dad. It's not appropriate to discuss it in front of." He paused, clearly struggling with how to refer to Marcus without sounding obviously classist. "In front of my friend," I suggested. "The man who's been kinder to me in the past year than either of you have been in the past 5. "Your friend?" Rebecca's voice pitched higher. "Dad, he's your gardener. He works for you." "He works with me," I corrected. "And he's here because he wants to be, not because he needs something from me." The distinction was lost on them, but I saw Marcus glance at me with something like gratitude. "Fine," David said tightly. "Have it your way. We know about the will, Dad. We know you're leaving everything to him." He gestured toward Marcus, who looked genuinely shocked. "Mr. Gerald?" Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is that true?" I turned to face him fully. "Yes, Marcus, it's true. I was planning to tell you eventually, but not like this. But why? I don't understand. I can't accept that. It's too much." And there it was. The difference between Marcus and my children crystallized in a single moment. His first instinct wasn't to celebrate or calculate or demand details. It was to protest that he didn't deserve it. "You can and you will," I said firmly, "because you've treated me like family when my actual family only saw me as a bank account." Rebecca stepped forward, her composure cracking. "That's not fair, Dad. We love you. We've always loved you." "No, Rebecca, you've always loved what I could do for you. There's a difference." "That's not true." Tears were streaming down her face now, genuine tears that might have moved me 6 months ago. "I know we made mistakes. I know the Christmas party thing was wrong, but we can fix this. We can be better." "Can you?" I asked quietly. "When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my health, my interests, my thoughts on anything that didn't involve money? When was the last time you invited me to something without expecting me to pay for it?" The silence that followed was answer enough. David tried a different approach. "Dad, look, maybe we haven't been perfect children, but we're still your blood. Doesn't that mean something? Don't you want your legacy to stay in the family?" I gestured toward Marcus, who was standing quietly beside me, still looking stunned by the revelation. "This is my legacy, David. A man who works hard, treats people with respect, and values relationships over transactions. Marcus represents everything I tried to teach you both and everything you chose to ignore." "He's a stranger," Rebecca burst out. "He's not your family." "Neither are you," I said, and the words hung in the air like a judgment. "Not anymore." You stopped being my family the moment you decided my love wasn't worth having unless it came with a price tag. Marcus cleared his throat softly. Mr. Gerald, maybe we should talk about this privately later. This seems like something you should work out with your children. The kindness in his voice, his instinct to help even when he was the target of my children's anger, only reinforced my decision. There's nothing to work out, Marcus. Rebecca and David made their choice when they decided I was only valuable for what I could give them. Now I've made mine. This isn't over, David said, his voice hard with anger. We'll fight this. We'll take it to court if we have to. You're welcome to try, I replied calmly. James Harrison assures me you'll lose, but you're welcome to waste your money on lawyers if it makes you feel better. Our money? Rebecca's voice was shrill now. You mean our money that you're giving away to a stranger? No, I mean your money that you'll spend on legal fees while trying to get my money. Money that was never yours to begin with. They left after that, hurling accusations and threats over their shoulders as they stalked back to their cars. I watched them go with something like relief. The confrontation I'd been dreading for months was over, and I felt free. Marcus and I worked in silence for a while after they left. Finally, he set down his spade and looked at me directly. Mr. Gerald, I need you to understand something. I never expected this. I never even dreamed of something like this. You don't owe me anything. I know, I said. That's exactly why you deserve it. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What should I do? Live your life, Marcus. Buy that house you've been saving for. Send your children to college. Take Elena on a vacation. Be happy. Will you? Will you still be part of our lives, even after? The question broke my heart a little, in the best possible way. Even learning he was about to inherit millions, his first concern was whether our friendship would survive the change. If you'll have me, I said, I'd like that very much. 6 months later, I was sitting in Marcus and Elena's new backyard, watching Sophia and Miguel play on the swing set I'd helped Marcus build. The house was modest but beautiful, with a large garden where Elena was growing vegetables and flowers. It was filled with laughter and warmth and the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions. Elena brought me a glass of lemonade and sat down beside me on the porch step. Gerald, she said in her careful English, thank you. Not for the money, for being family. Family. The word had taken on new meaning over the past year. It wasn't about blood or obligation or shared DNA. It was about choice, about showing up, about caring for each other without keeping score. Rebecca and David had fought the will for 4 months before finally accepting defeat. The last communication I'd received from either of them was a brief, bitter letter from Rebecca informing me that I was no longer welcome in their lives, as if I'd been welcome before. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they were struggling financially without their expected inheritance. Rebecca's marriage was reportedly under strain, and David had been forced to sell his house and move into something smaller. Part of me felt sad about their difficulties, but mostly I felt vindicated. They were learning, perhaps for the first time, that actions have consequences. As the sun set over Marcus and Elena's garden, their children climbed into my lap to hear a story. Sophia's small hand patted my cheek as she settled against my shoulder, and Miguel's arm wrapped around my neck with unconscious trust. This was what family felt like. Not transactions or obligations or conditional love, just presence, just acceptance, just the simple joy of being together because we chose to be. I'd lost 2 children but gained a family. It was, I realized, the best trade I'd ever made. When the children fell asleep in my arms, Elena gently took them inside to bed. Marcus and I sat on the porch in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. Thank you, he said quietly. Thank you, I replied. We didn't need to explain what we were thanking each other for. He knew. I knew. And that understanding, that simple appreciation for each other's presence, was worth more than all the money in the world. For the first time in decades, I was exactly where I belonged. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.